Remember back in the day when you would use an arcade machine after somebody else and the entire surface and buttons were all sticky? I'd like to think it was just candy and soda pop, but honestly, I'd rather not think about why the entire arcade machine was just sticky. But regardless, this figure definitely brought me back to the good old days. It definitely hit me with a bunch of nostalgia, especially considering we've been waiting quite a bit of time for this particular figure. And let me just start off by stating the obvious. I just absolutely love the box. I love the packaging. I love the fact that Jada is actually going out there and actively making you keep the packaging, which is something that I usually don't do. If I open up a figure, it's going in the trash, but this is one of those that I actually tried my best to open and keep as perfectly as I possibly could. I do plan on using these as somewhat of a backdrop for my Jada Toys Street Fighter action figures, or potentially for anywhere on my display, wherever it fits in, wherever it looks good, that's where I'm going to display them. And I know what most of you guys are thinking: Angel, can you stop jizzing over the packaging? Can we get into the figure itself? And I guess I should start off with the things that I didn't like, the minor little nitpicks, the QC issues that I had. And even though none of them are deal breakers, they're definitely worth noting and bringing up. So let's start off with one of the bigger QC issues. I guess we'll start off with the articulation, which is a big point of emphasis for me. The ankles were a really huge issue for me. The rocker on this particular ankle joint just is not very good. So the pivoting is very limited. Even when it feels like the ankles can articulate to the point where you want them to, for some reason they kind of tend to snap back into place or slowly snap back. So as you guys can see in a lot of the poses, his foot does not lay flat on the surface. So it's just very frustrating for a figure that's supposed to be highly articulated, because every stance that I can get this figure and obviously has to kind of mimic his fighting style from the video game. Another big issue that I had was with the wrists. So if you happen to articulate them too high up or too high down, the wrist or the hand itself will come out of the socket. So I think that's a decision that they made where they didn't want to break up the sculpt too badly. And so they decided, we're going to hide the wrist joints as well as the ankle joints. And in turn, it helped the body sculpt look really well finished, really well done, and just kind of seamless. Whereas if they had chosen to just go all out with the articulation, some of the joints might have been a little bit gappy, or a lot of the joints just might have been too exposed. I think the ab crunch is something that was hurt a little bit. The forward ab crunch and the backward, it's not too bad, but I think they could have broken up the body sculpt just a little bit more for the sake of articulation, because I think this is one of those few figures where I would rather prefer the crazy dynamic articulation rather than like the seamless body mold that looks really well done and really well sculpted. The paint job around the shoe area or the feet is very sloppy as well, at least in my particular figure. So it got by with quite a few QC issues. The plastic also from the body is different from the head sculpt. It's very noticeable if you're up front. From far away, you can't really tell. So the only real major issues, as I said, the paint stuff I could get by on, and the different plastic from the head and the body sculpt. But the one thing that I really can't forgive is the articulation for a figure that's supposed to be really heavy articulated. Having said all of that, there are some phenomenal things when it comes down to this figure that I think Jada Toys just completely did almost to near perfection. I think the pinless joints is probably the biggest feature that sticks out at me, because we constantly hear from other OMs that the technology is either just out of reach for some OMs, or it's a very expensive feature for one of these big manufacturers to take on. But Jada Toys, with their first articulated 1/12 scale action figure line, they came right out with pinless joints, which I think is kind of like a backhanded compliment to all the OMs that don't have pinless yet, or those that kind of put it off for years and years of them releasing stuff with pins. Not only that, the butterfly joints work phenomenally. The double jointed knees do a fantastic job. There's a thigh cut as well as an ankle cut, so there's great swivel there. You can get the full 360 rotation, which makes it up a little bit for the lack of great ankle articulation. I also love the wash that they put on the body. It really brings out those lines, those muscles, the tone. I think it really brings it out, even though it probably will make you feel a little bit self-conscious. It's definitely an intimidating figure, but that really doesn't matter, I guess. It's a phenomenal wash, and like I said, just brings out the details even more. I should also mention that it does come with a decent array of different accessories. It does come with an opened palmed hand, a couple of open palmed hands, the two-fisted hands, two head sculpts, and then the fire effect for his iconic kick. So at that $25 price point, I think it's a pretty solid deal. Nothing too crazy, but just enough to make the price justifiable, especially at nowadays, where that's kind of the norm from almost every single manufacturer out there. So just to summarize, guys, and again, this is just my personal opinion. I know people will look at it from different angles and different perspectives, but just in my personal opinion, I feel like I would have much rather not had the extra head sculpt and then the flame effect if it meant getting better designs around the joints. Even if that just meant I was just going to have the alternate hands and that was the only accessory that the figure was going to come with, I would have been okay with that, as long as they would have spent those maybe extra $2 to $3 in engineering the figure, especially around those wrists. The ankles are, somewhat limited, and then the ab crunch. I think those three things had, even if that meant breaking up the sculpt just a little bit to get that extra dynamic articulation and that posability, I think, for at least in my personal opinion, it would have made for a much better figure. Not to say that this isn't an amazing figure, but I think those tiny little issues that it had really held it from being, at least in my personal opinion, potentially the best figure of the year, at least from last year, which I guess officially it's a 2023 figure, even though I'm reviewing it in 2024. But I think it could have easily been the best figure from last year had it just cemented those tiny little issues, cleaned it up a little bit more, even if that meant, like I said, I know there's a budget and there's only a certain amount of money that they can invest in this figure without losing or without making the profit feasible. So for me, just my personal opinion, I would have preferred that. Take the extra accessories out of it and then just give us a better articulated figure. I don't like giving like ratings or scores or anything like that, but if I had to give this figure, like I said, it was very close to being a 10. I'm gonna bring it down to like just a very high 8, like very, very high. It's a phenomenal figure, amazing packaging, solid butterfly joints. I love the pinless stuff. I love the double jointed elbows, double jointed knees. I love the overall sculpt work. The wash on the body is phenomenal. It's a really great figure, and for that price point, I think it could easily very well be maybe the best figure from last year. Even with those minor issues, because it's a $25 figure, you're just getting so much out of it, so much value, so much posability. I had a ton of fun with this figure. Even, like I said, even though it had some minor issues, that didn't really deter me from just going all out and posing this figure and really falling asleep with it next to me, which sounds a little bit weird, but I just fell asleep posing it. That's just how fun it was. So in my personal opinion, I guarantee you guys at that $25 price point, it is well worth your money. Go out there, pick it up. I think it's still pretty obtainable through Amazon. I myself do plan on picking up at least one more just to keep in box, just because I'm not really an inbox collector, but I just love these figures so much that I'm probably going to double up on them. But as always, guys, I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Let me know down below in the comment section. Did you love it? Did you not love it? What were your issues with it? Like I said, very curious to see what you guys have to say. Thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.